Coming up today, Korea reports a 7th death from MERS as the number of confirmed cases increases by 8 to 95. Despite this, concerns are subsiding somewhat as experts say the situation shouldn't get that much worse. Foreign investors go on a bond buying bonanza in May, snapping up around $2.8 billion worth, the largest single monthly amount in over 2 years. Plus, wrapping up their summit in Germany, the G7 vows to eliminate the world's dependence on carbon by the end of the century. They also have strong words for Russia and North Korea. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 9th of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks as always for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome or MERS outbreak here in Korea. Let's go straight over to our Kim Ji-yeon, who has been keeping tabs on this developing story for us and joins us at the news center. Ji-yeon, what's the latest?
Well, Mark, one more person died earlier today, raising the MERS death toll to 7, with the number of confirmed cases currently at 95. 2 people from Wonju, Gangwon-do province have tested positive for the virus, becoming the first cases in that province. And one of the people, a 42-year-old woman, said she had undergone treatment at Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul late last month. And the other, a 46-year-old man who was visiting the woman, and it's believed that they could have been infected during their stay at that hospital. Also, Chungcheongbuk-do province has reported its first MERS case, a 60-something-year-old man who is believed to have caught the virus after also having undergone treatment at the same Samsung Medical Center. And health authorities have shut down in response to medical centers in the province, including the Okcheon Medical Clinic, as a containment measure. And also around 2,200 schools and preschools, which is more than 10% of schools nationwide, have closed temporarily as a cautionary measure. In response to the rising concerns about the MERS spreading to other local communities, Acting Prime Minister Choi Geunhye vowed to mobilize all necessary resources to combat the virus with the new goal of stopping the virus spread within the week. Choi also said that there's a need to deal with the MERS outbreak at the serious level, the country's highest response level for infectious diseases, instead of the current level of caution.
And Ji-yeon, the death toll and the number of confirmed patients are increasing by the day, but health authorities seem certain that the virus can be contained. At this point, is it really possible to see an end to all of this in a week's time?
Well, the health officials have repeatedly been saying that an infection isn't necessarily deadly, and a lot depends on the strength of one's immune system. And we've seen at least 2 patients during the past week who have been discharged from hospitals after being cleared of infection. So it seems that to a certain point, the government is going in the right direction to combat the virus. And I'm not the only one who shares this view. An investigative team from the World Health Organization, which arrived yesterday and has met with the health ministry, says that the Korean government is handling the MERS outbreak well, and that the team is expected to initiate its own research and infection control measures starting today.
And Ji-yeon, as preventative measures, we've been told to wash our hands regularly and thoroughly and to wear masks in crowded places when we're out and about. Is there anything else we have to keep in mind to prevent the spread of this MERS virus?
Well, the health ministry has requested the cooperation with the members of the public and says those who don't require medical treatment at this time to refrain from visiting local hospitals and medical centers unless you're really sick. And the government says that it will provide full coverage of all medical expenses for the time being for confirmed and suspected MERS patients. Back to you, Mark.
Now, President Park Geunhye has asked the public to cooperate with the government's efforts to contain the MERS outbreak. At a cabinet meeting on this Tuesday, she asked the Korean people to report suspected cases of infection and to follow authorities' instructions after having come into contact with someone with the virus. Stressing that the outbreak can be managed, the president said Korea will be able to wipe out the virus in the near future. President Park then said the outbreak should not have a negative effect on the Korean economy, calling on officials to take measures to minimize the economic impact from MERS. She mentioned targeted support for businesses in the affected regions and industries. And a parliamentary health committee will hold a meeting with medical experts this afternoon to discuss ways to contain the spread of the MERS virus. The lawmakers plan to assess Korea's disease control system and hear what the experts have to say about ways to improve it. They will also come up with plans to effectively counter the MERS outbreak and formulate measures that can be carried out in a transparent manner. The government, which has come under fire for its poor initial response to the outbreak, also plans to devise more support measures, such as financial assistance for confirmed or potential MERS patients. Now, understandably, there are concerns about the MERS outbreak, but some medical experts are staying positive. They say MERS is not as dangerous as people might think, and the virus can be brought under control in Korea for a number of solid reasons. Han Da-han reports.
You don't need to worry about MERS if you're healthy, and the virus can be contained soon. That is the message many medical experts are sending out to Korea, where people have been waking up to fresh news about new MERS cases every morning for the past few weeks. Dr. Daniel Lucy, a professor at Georgetown University Medical Center, has said MERS is only a distant relative of the virus that caused SARS in 2003, and it's much less contagious than SARS or even the flu. He also reiterated what other experts have been saying, that MERS in Korea has only been transmitted at hospitals where patients with the virus are being treated. And he said it can be prevented from spreading into the general population, just as with other countries that have experienced MERS. That's because MERS doesn't spread easily from person to person without close contact. He also focused on the fact that most people without pre-existing conditions, including lung disease, kidney disease, and a few others, will only suffer a mild illness if they contract the virus. Dr. Lucy said the spread of MERS can be stopped soon with cooperation from all sectors of society. In fact, Korea's fifth MERS patient, who has been fully cleared of infection, told Korea's Chungang Daily that he only experienced a bit of muscle pain, some coughing, and a slight fever. Doctors in Korea are also helping to educate the public about the disease and say that tuberculosis, not MERS, is the single most dangerous infectious disease in the country now. They're calling attention to the fact that some 37,000 tuberculosis cases were confirmed in Korea in 2013 alone, with more than 2,400 deaths the same year. Health authorities say it remains to be seen how far MERS will spread in Korea, but what's more important is to refrain from spreading fear and maintain good hygiene by washing your hands regularly. Han Da-han, Arirang News.
Now, the ongoing situation regarding the MERS virus in Korea is increasing uncertainty in the domestic economy, despite some signs of recovery. In its economic trend report released on Tuesday, the Finance Ministry said the job market isn't growing fast enough and production and investment isn't getting better due to sluggish exports. Now, raising a degree of optimism is that spending has been picking up as consumer prices are still at low levels, largely due to cheap oil prices. The ministry says retail sales rose in May, with department stores doing especially well, seeing sales jump 3.6% compared to the previous month. In the rest of the day's news now, and foreigners snapped up some $2.8 billion worth of Korean bonds last month, the largest monthly inflow in 2.25 years. Korea's Financial Supervisory Service says foreign investors boosted their holdings by the biggest margin since February 2013. Switzerland, Luxembourg and China were among the countries that made the largest bond investments. On the stock market, offshore investors were also net buyers, nabbing a net $1.2 billion. The regulator says as of the end of May, stock ownership by foreigners accounted for slightly over 30% of the total market capitalization. Growth in global trade is slowing sharply due largely to China's falling numbers. Research company Oxford Economics says world trade is expected to grow just 2.6% this year, down from 4% last year, and around half its long-term average pace. Economist Adam Slater noted the projected pace of growth looks more akin to that seen in world recessions than a period of recovery, whereas China added about 0.5 percentage points a year to the global trade in goods between 2012 and 2014, it subtracted roughly 0.7 percentage points in the first quarter of this year. That's the first time since the 2008 global financial crisis that China has detracted from world trade growth. Korea's exports figures didn't make pretty reading either. In May, they posted a decline of 10.9%, falling for the fourth straight month and marking the first double-digit slide in 6 years. There's a big chance China will take a 25 to 30% stake in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and that means that Beijing will be able to veto major decisions made at the institution. This is according to analysis by the Wall Street Journal based on the bank's articles of incorporation agreed upon last month by the 57 founding member nations. It said in this report that the China-led AIIB would start with $100 billion in registered capital, and Beijing will be providing nearly $30 billion of that as the capital base. Korea is expected to hold the fifth largest stake with $3.7 billion. World leaders at the G7 summit in Germany have agreed that the world should end its reliance on fossil fuels within this century. They also pledged to take action on a range of issues from the crisis in Ukraine to Islamic extremism. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Leaders of 7 major world economies wrapped up their 2-day summit on Monday with a joint declaration that touched on a variety of global issues. Their agreements on climate change have drawn the most attention. The leaders endorsed a goal of zero carbon emissions worldwide by the year 2100.
We have clearly said as the G7 that we need binding rules at the heart of the climate agreement. The world does not have any binding rules at the moment, and therefore that must be a goal in Paris.
Ahead of a United Nations climate meeting in France later this year, the G7 agreed to limit the rise in global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 70% by 2050. With regard to the crisis in Ukraine, the 7 countries reiterated that sanctions against Russia will remain in place until a ceasefire deal is fully respected.
And the G7 is making it clear that, if necessary, we stand ready to impose additional significant sanctions against Russia.
Talking about the strategy against Islamic State militants in Arab nations, Obama said the international community is willing to do more to fight against terrorism and violent extremism. The declaration also strongly condemned North Korea for its continued development of nuclear and ballistic missile programs and for its appalling human rights violations. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now back here in Korea, and Prime Minister nominee Hwang Kyo-ahn is fielding some tough questions on day 2 of his confirmation hearing at the National Assembly. Lawmakers from a special parliamentary committee have been grilling Hwang on the large sums of money he received while working at a local law firm. This after retiring from his former chief prosecutor post, and allegations that he used legal loopholes to reduce his tax liability on real estate transactions. The nominee's exemption from mandatory military service is another issue coming under the spotlight. Hwang says he was exempted due to a skin disease. Opposition parties have also stressed that around half of the documents requested have not yet been submitted, and they have been urging Hwang to submit them as soon as possible. Ruling party lawmakers have sided with the nominee, saying some of the documents cannot be submitted due to privacy concerns. The full text of a report claiming the US military used biological weapons during the Korean War will soon be up for auction. Kobe, Korea's largest art and antiques auction company, said Tuesday that filmmaker Geunhye is selling the document after having acquired it in 2013 from a bookstore in England. The so-called Needham report contains photos, maps and testimony from American POWs that biological weapons developed from Japanese research were used during the war. It was filed in 1953 and was thought to have been discarded. US psychologist Jeffrey Kay posted a 64-page version of the 670-page document online in January. The US maintains it did not use biological weapons during the Korean War. Senior officials from Korea and Japan are set to hold talks in Seoul today to try and resolve a heated row over Tokyo's controversial bid to inscribe wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This will be their second meeting on this issue. Tokyo wants World Heritage status for 23 industrial facilities, despite the fact that 7 of them used nearly 60,000 Koreans as forced laborers during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. The final decision on this UNESCO bid will be made during a meeting of the World Heritage Committee early next month in Germany. And those are the stories we've been following on this Tuesday afternoon in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, and do download our smartphone application for all the day's stories and our programs as well. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.